Hello, fellow solvers. This is Cog with Cog Analytics. Today we're doing a deep dive into the Summarize tool. This is one of the 23 tools on the core exam, at least as of the time of this recording, and it is the sixth most commonly used tool, with about 5% of all tool usage being with the Summarize tool. For those that are familiar with Excel, it is an important tool for replicating pivot tables in Alteryx. And that is because the function of the Summarize tool is aggregation. In fact, it allows you to do many different forms of aggregation, including numerical operations like sum, product, as of version 2023 and onward, including other more standard operations like averages, min, max, count, count distinct. In addition, it lets you do string operations like concatenation, finding the longest or shortest words, and even beyond that, various financial operations, spatial operations, and even report operations, namely joining horizontally or vertically. With that, let's jump into the configuration for this tool. What you can see immediately is that it's divided into two halves, the top being the fields section and then the actions section below it. One thing that cannot be seen that's related to action section at the very bottom, occasionally there will be an action property or property section that will be enabled for only certain actions. Like concatenation, for example, is one that has properties that can be edited and adjusted based on the user needs. But focusing on the top and bottom halves for now, another way to think about it that may be simpler is input and output. So everything in the top half is going to be your input fields as well as the by data type. Anything then that you want to output from the summarize tool, you can aggregate using an action, and that will build out your output for the tool. So any fields that do not appear in this bottom section will not be output from the tool. And inversely or conversely, anything that does appear here will be in the output for the summarize tool. With that, let's jump into our example. Our example here is based off of a new tradition that's been started since September of 2024, where we invite a series of good friends, Sample, Analyst, Matrix, Normalize, and Filter, for a kebarbecue. We have three different options for kebabs, chicken, veggie, and steak, as well as the number that each guest eats of that category, and then the date of the particular party. With November right around the corner, at least as of the time of this recording, we need to run some analytics so that we can be as prepared as possible for our upcoming party and so that our guests can have a grand time and get the kebabs that they so desire. With that, one of the things that we immediately would like to know is how many kebabs we anticipate serving at our November party. In order to do that, we'll throw on a summarize tool because we will look back in history at our various dates, which we can group by, and we want to see how many total kebabs we've served. One of the things that you'll immediately notice is that whenever we use the group by action, the output field name here on the right is the same as the original field name. So Alteryx doesn't do anything to manipulate or change this output name. However, if we choose a different action like sum, it adds a prefix indicating what action was taken. There is no way, at least as of the time of this recording, to remove this without manually editing. So if you have a lot of fields, it can be quite tedious to go through all of them and manually change them. The only other way to fix that is to add more tools later on in the workflow to dynamically change the name of your fields. In our case, it's very simple. Since we only have one field, we'll just manually delete the prefix since we don't need it. And so now what we have is an output that should have each unique date, and the aggregation action that's being taken is summing the quantity. So we'll see how many total kebabs for each date or for each party date we have served. And as you can see again, for date and group by, specifically action, and then for the sum action, there are no properties to adjust or edit. So with that, we can go ahead and add one more tool to this workflow because we don't just want to know how many kebabs we've served, we want to know how many we can expect to serve in November. One of the ways we can do that is we can take a look at the quantity field specifically, and we'll take the minimum now and maximum. And again, remember this quantity is now by date. And so we'll see what the minimum quantity for a given or for any party was, as well as the most kebabs served at a party. So if we run this, we can now see our output. We have two fields. So the fewest we've served is 16 and the most we've served is 18. So as long as we're within this ballpark, we will likely have our guests covered. We might just get 20. Okay, so that's good information, but one of the things, again, from our input data set is we have 3 different kebab types, and our guests have different preferences. And so it'll be useful to know how much of each ingredient do we need to go to the store to buy in order to satisfy, again, the preferences of our guests. So one way we can do that, of course, we will throw on a summarize tool. Now, name is irrelevant, but we do want the kebab type in addition to the date. One of the things you can do is control click, and that will select multiple fields in your field section or the input section. And we can add group by from here. And now we have both included in the output. Now we don't have to do just one at a time. And then as before, we will sum the quantity. Delete that. Okay, if we run this, and we'll move the date up. That's one of the things too. So depending on the order in this list, this determines the order of the output list. And so if we want date to be our first field in the output, we can click these up and down arrows to move the fields around. One of the things that's worth noting is you can select multiple fields in the actions list as well, and you can move them together. Finally, I'll add to it. Let's just say we added name by accident as a group by, and we want to get rid of this. We can select this field, hit this little minus button in the circle, and it will remove the field from our output or from the actions section. So now we have our date, the kebab type, as well as quantity. We're grouping by the first 2 fields and summing on the final. So if we run this, what we now have is for each date for the prior 2 parties, we have the kebab type as well as how many of those particular kebabs we happen to serve. So in September, we served 5 chicken kebabs. Okay, so now, again, that is not all the information we need. What we want to know is for each type, irrespective of date, what we can do, so we'll group by the kebab type. We want the average. That is in the numeric section here. You can see right at the top we have average. Now we get the average quantity for each type. And again, you can see there are no action properties for the average action. Now if we run this, we can see for each type how many kebabs we served on average at our parties. So 9 veggies, 4 steaks, and chickens. And so this gives us a good idea of what we need to go to the store to get in order to ensure that the preferences and needs of our guests are met. Perfect. One of the things too that can be useful for different use cases or business cases is being able to combine a list or identify which categories or subcategories belong to a category. And so in this case, one of the things that we might be interested in identifying is for each individual, what kebab types do they prefer? Maybe somebody only prefers chicken, somebody only prefers steak, maybe even somebody only veggie, or a combination thereof. So one of the things we can do for that, and one of the ways people will generally approach this incorrectly, is they will start properly. And one of the things too, actually, I'll highlight this drop down right now. So you can see here we have our fields to select. We can sort as well. But we can select the fields with this drop down as well. So we can select none, we can select all, we can select numeric. You can see that it highlights only the fields with that data type. Or in our case, which just from this example, we know that we want both string fields. And so we can select string here and all our string fields are highlighted instead of having to control click. Now we can just group by both of those. I want the name to be first, so I'll click the arrow keys and adjust, and we will leave it at that. So one of the things, first off, that people will do is they'll group by name, which is perfect, and then they will immediately do their concatenation. You can see here the concatenate properties immediately come up. There is a start character, a separator, and end character. This appears at the very beginning of the output. This is what separates between each item in the list that's being concatenated, and then the very final character of the output. So if you want things like open and close parentheses, for example, you can put that here, and it will capture all of the items, comma separated list, bound on both ends by open and close parentheses. In our case, we don't need those. We'll just stick with the comma separator, and we'll leave that as is for now. What you can see immediately, the problem that we run into is that when we run this, we have duplicates. And so filter had steak, veggie, chicken, and veggie. And this is not very helpful. And you can imagine if we had a much larger data set, that this would become very messy very quickly and not really communicate the information that we want it to. One of the workarounds for this is instead of immediately concatenating, as again, it's very often the case that one summarize tool will be all that you need to get the job done. But sometimes it is beneficial to stack them together as we've been doing in all of our current examples. And in order to do that, what we'll do is group by twice. So this will create a unique list on name and kebab type. So if we run this now, this output here, there is one veggie type of each type for a given name or for a given guest. And so we've fixed the problem of the duplications. So if we add another summarize tool, now we can group by name and concatenate by the type. That's its string, concatenate, keep the comma separated list. If we run this, we can now see that the duplication issue has been remedied, and now each of these items is unique. One of the ways that I typically handle a problem like this, in addition to this, is I will incorporate a sort tool in between here so that these are not only unique, but also so that they are duplicated or connected together. So I can do more aggregations or more analysis. You can see here the order is incorrect. So steak, veggie, chicken, and then veggie, steak, chicken. The sort tool can help correct that issue, but that is outside of the scope of this particular video. And one of the things we can immediately see is that Analyst, as we suspected, is vegetarian. And so we can go to her in preparation for our party and figure out what some of her favorite vegetables are or have been from prior parties so that we can cater to her needs and her preferences and make sure that she has the best time that she can have at our next party. Anyways, this is our deep dive into the Summarize tool, covering all of the basics, basic functionality, how to use the tool, basic best practices, as well as some common pitfalls. One of the other things I want to cover actually really quickly is that the orientation or the order of the fields is irrelevant. So this output date, kebab type, and quantity is exactly the same as this one. They don't aggregate date, do the sum, and then aggregate by kebab after the fact. Whenever the tool is run, whenever the workflow is run, all of the group bys are evaluated first to break the data up into the various categories, and the aggregation steps are run on those categories. And so it doesn't matter what the order of your fields is. The only thing that this order changes is the way that the output is structured, the order of the fields in the output. So that is it for this video. As always, like and subscribe and comment any cool use cases or workflows that you've built with the Summarize tool. I'd love to hear it. In addition, if you have any questions regarding the Summarize tool, post that as well. I am happy to answer any questions as the best I can. As always, I hope this helps, and happy solving.